Welcome. I can turn down my monitor here. Welcome to another Magento webinar. Magento Association bringing you experiences made better with the help of some of our friends. So I'd like to say welcome everyone to 2021. Congratulations, you made it. I think that joke is going to be used more than once, and deservedly so. But we're all happy to have you here. And for those of you with colleagues, maybe just make sure that they're aware if they can't make it to, or they didn't make it to this event, we will have this recorded and posted up later on. So I'd like to get going by introducing our panel. You have myself, Ben Marks, coming to you as Adobe's ex officio board member of the Magento Association. I will be the dumbest person in the room. It's my favorite role. With me today, in addition to all of you wonderful, lovely people in the audience, I have my colleague, Eric Irway, Senior Manager of Product at Adobe for Magento. I also have Drew Garrett, Senior Front-End Dev for JH, one of the fantastic partners out of the UK, also producers of the fantastic Meet Magento UK event. When that can take place again, I will make sure to show up. And then last and certainly not least, Elizabeth Sweeney joining us, she's product manager at Google. So you have us with you today. We're going to go through a bit of content. And along the way, feel free to post questions into the chat, and we will have ample time. We may take on some of those questions during the course of our opening presentation, and then we will have ample time for Q&A at the end. So, just a quick overview of what we're going to be reviewing today. We're going to have the latest on Magento. So looking at performance and experience trends as they have shaped up, leading us to this moment, and then what we're looking for going into the future. And then quite importantly from Google, updates coming to Core Web Vitals in 2021. If you aren't all that familiar with Core Web Vitals, well, congratulations, you're in the right place. And it'll be imperative that you understand the implications of CWV and how it's going to factor into your business this year. And then finally, how you can get started with Core Web Vitals and Magento. So tying it all together. Again, you've got the right people in the room. And so with that, I will kick it over to my colleague, Eric, to talk about the latest on Magento.
Fantastic. So thank you so much, Ben. So again, just want to add a little bit of context to this webinar, and I just want to be really, really thankful for the association, for Elizabeth, for Drew, Ben, for hosting this one. This has really been coming together over the course of, I would say, over 2 years. And I think what we're really trying to do is get beyond a lot of things we talk about in the community around PWA and really start to get into the experiences. And we are so lucky to have to Elizabeth and Google and JH really to bring their experience and add depth here. And so we're going to make this as dynamic as we can, but we're going to draw upon some of the latest performance and experience trends happening at Magento and kind of where we're going from here. So we talked a little bit about this at some of the Meet Magento series last year, and the reality is Magento 2 is changing. And we're going to hear a lot about today is how we're continuing to improve the developer experience, how we're adapting for the mobile first economy, which is exactly where this started off with, again, about 3 years ago. But we're also optimizing for the speed and the need for change. And when we talk about experience, we're really talking about experiences from the developer, the partner, and the merchant perspective. And then ultimately, this is going to produce dynamic, superior experiences. And so this still, for us is a bit of a passion and really continues to accelerate and grow within the world of Adobe. And ultimately, those experiences drive everything a merchant would want as a result. And that's really comes down to both the empowerment of merchants, but also the business users who use this every single day. So change is coming. We've been working on this for a couple of years. PWA is just a small part of it. And so what you're going to hear about today has a lot to do with what we're doing, but then how this starts to look at from an outside perspective. So a couple key stats here on the left, as part of the Adobe world, we get a lot of great access to Adobe Analytics. And so if you think about what's happening around the world, and again, the basic premise for our business case when we started P2Way and really some of the improvements around merchant and shopping experiences is the fact that, we're going more towards a mobile world faster than ever before. We, especially during the pandemic, have accelerated our industry 10 years and in some cases 10 weeks in 2020. And we continue to follow a trend where we really need to be mindful of the mobile first economy and really smartphones driving all of this. And while this isn't terribly surprising, the experiences themselves, we need to be mindful of those. And the goal for what we'll be talking about here is achieving those near native like experiences on the web. And so that's what we've been working on in collaboration with Google over the past 2-3 years. And the good news is, and we'll hear a little bit more from Elizabeth on this, is we're heading in the right direction. So if you take a look at the source here on the right, HTTP archive is a great way to kind of take a look at all the Magento sites to date. And so this is a snapshot of what last year looked like. And you can see we're making some progress, especially on mobile. We've got some work to do, but for key areas like first contentful paint, which we'll learn about here a bit, we are making a difference, and we're trying to really make and create some strides on making that better. And so we're pretty excited about that. Again, with what we're doing, P2E is a part of it, but there's really more to come, especially as that hits experience. So again, the big theme here is we want to get beyond performance and experience. And so as we start to talk a little bit more about core vitals, what we're doing is well more than just performance. And I think some of the experiences from Drew and team and some of the earliest adoption of our products are starting to show that. But in reality, and you see this chart here from Google, from Gartner, is the P2A as it's seen in every stage of the core customer journey. At the discovery phase, it's really about finding your storefront. At the engage phase, it's about searching, browsing, comparing, reading reviews, selecting, kind of going through that shopper kind of browse experience, and then ultimately making that purchase. We've got a lot of great work to start thinking about what it means to be an integrated, in a responsive, and really, in some cases, a partially offline world. So making that purchase, being able to come back to that by way of, let's say, a notification or even an in-store pickup are really, again, starting to scratch the surface on the capabilities that have been in your devices at this point for more than 5 years. That's really, again, what we're trying to do. Well, more than just performance, starting to getting into these experiences, and then finding really, I would say, objective and measurable ways to track our progress against it. So a couple key stats on PW Studio, and again, PW Studio and Venya, which is our reference storefront for both Magento and also Adobe by the numbers, is that the adoption has been fantastic. We have over 70 stores built using PW Studio to date. We've got 170 of them that we're actually seeing across built with. And those are really comprising of about 30 known extensions and themes that are on third-party sites to date. And as a result, on average, we're seeing twice as much performance as measured by Google Lighthouse and about 30% average engagement scores as measured by time on site and other key characteristics. And again, these are just a handful of those launches through partners like JH and some of the work that Drew and team are doing. So I'm going to ask Drew maybe just to add a little bit more context here. His team has done a lot of the great work here, and again, I've seen some really great results in these case studies.
Yeah, we have had some really great success over the last couple of years with this, particularly with two of the examples that you have up on the board there, Selco's Builds Warehouse and our latest PW release in Workwear Express. The kind of core web vitals numbers and performance numbers that we've been able to achieve with Workwear, we simply wouldn't have been able to achieve any other way. The PWA development experience and how that has allowed us to change and optimize is what's allowed that performance, and what it's done for the client or the customer and their customers is as well has been tremendous. The sales speak for themselves for Workwear Express. It has been a very positive experience, and I don't think our developers would go back.
For sure. Yeah, I think the Selco one's really interesting. I encourage you to take a look at some of the case studies, but Selco in particular is an interesting that happened during the pandemic, where you start to think about the resiliency of these experiences. And so as stores started to reopen during the pandemic, that ability to withstand really that burst of traffic as things start to open, it is a great example. And in talking to the team here, the fact that really the infrastructure didn't even flinch. with the type of traffic that was happening. And so that's a really great customer experience as a result. And so Drew and team continue to be very modest about this. There's a lot of great material here. I'd encourage you to take a look at beyond this. That's really what we're trying to do. It's well more than performance. It really starts to get into these other key characteristics that were reserved in some cases for native, but have really brought themselves to the web in these key commerce experiences. So I think with that, I'm going to hand it off to Elizabeth, who's going to talk a little bit more about Core Web Vitals and how this comes together.
Awesome. Thanks, Eric. So moving straight in, we're going to be kind of high level, what are Core Web Vitals, making sure we're all up to speed and on the same page as far as kind of foundational basics, why they matter, just making sure that we're, backing up already what Eric and Drew just said, just adding some more to that, and then what to expect coming up. Next slide, please. And this is just a brief shout out. This is working on, building off of legends here. Always like to shout out to the team. Next, Ben, thank you. So you can actually move right along. I apparently really like title slides. So, that's what we have learned so far about Elizabeth in 2021. So Core Web Vitals are ultimately a set of quality dimensions, user-centric metrics, and thresholds that apply to all web pages across all industry verticals and all types of experiences on the web. So they are the signals to both developers and business stakeholders about the basic health of your site, and as such, they should be measured by everybody. So you can think about it as the basics of what you need to create the foundation of a healthy site. Next slide, please. And for 2020, the set of Core Web Vitals are LCP, which represents the quality dimension of loading, FID, first input delay for interactivity, and cumulative layout shift for layout stability. And, so we have these, and that's great, but why do we have them? It begs the question. We have a lot of metrics, we have a lot of different quality dimensions that we're looking at. Why these in particular? So this gets to why the program exists in the first place. So next slide, please. Historically, as our understanding of measurement of user experience improves, we release new metrics and update thresholds based on our understanding, but there are problems with that. And so you can see there's random timing and unexpected changes. You're not sure where to start. There's too many signals. There's a lot going on at Google sometimes, and you're unsure if the signals apply to me. If you click one more time, you'll see kind of how the Core Web Vitals program aims to address some of these primary concerns. It doesn't fix everything. Keep this in mind. There's no silver bullet to performance, sadly, or quality on the web. However, we are really trying to simplify the story and make sure that you know what kind of the actionable things are to make meaningful impact on not just your site performance, but obviously the business metrics behind it. Next slide, please. So, just kind of recap, we're trying to balance wanting to give you the latest in our research that we know to be impactful on your bottom line, while also not thrashing the ecosystem or injecting changes randomly. But as we know, there are other dimensions of quality that are extremely important. Accessibility, security, mobile friendliness. There are a lot of dimensions that make your site even better and are important to your site's success. So don't stop measuring these if you already are, but if you aren't already, once you have optimized your Core Web Vitals, you can begin to venture into measuring and benchmarking against other important vitals that are relevant to your business and your users. Core Web Vitals are just as the name indicates. They are core and provide you with that solid foundation upon which you can further optimize. And a great example of those other signals that are important are ones that are being used for page experience. So Search announced last year that page experience signals would be included in Google search ranking. And these signals measure how users perceive the experience of interacting with a web page and contribute to our ongoing work to make sure that people love the web. The new page experience signals combine Core Web Vitals with existing search signals like mobile friendliness, safe browsing, HTTPS, and intrusive interstitial guidelines. Core Web Vitals can be seen as the common denominator for all of these. And what to expect coming up as far as changes. So as I mentioned before, our ability to measure user experience is always improving. we expect to update Core Web Vitals on an annual basis and provide updates about future candidates, motivations, and implementation status as frequently as we possibly can. Looking ahead towards 2021 specifically, the year we're currently in, Core Web Vitals will be refreshed to make sure that it reflects the latest in our learnings. And a summary of that can be found on the next slide. So, we are investigating, again, how to make sure we are improving across the board. So we are considering FCP to round out our loading metrics. And we're considering reducing the FID threshold to make sure that it's more accommodating of more experiences on the web. And I'd say one of our biggest focus areas has been working on metrics that accommodate for better layout shift for long-lived sites, so that if people are staying on the site, you are not being penalized for that accruing metric. Beyond that, again, we are always looking to kind of expand, metrics that work better for single page apps, responsiveness after page load, smooth scrolling. So this speaks to the content stability desires that we have, and a bunch of other areas that we're really excited about. But again, we need to make sure that we have a really solid foundation of metrics and that it's achievable by the general corpus of the web, so that we can forge ahead with these. As far as expected timeline, again, as I said, for next slide, please. We can expect. There is a gap in my slides. Apologies for that. So I do encourage a watch for my colleagues Annie and Michael. They did an entire talk on showing what you can expect this year as far as work being done on Core Web Vitals. So moving along to Core Web Vitals measurement, just some basics, because my portfolio is tooling. So sorry, you can't get out of a talk with me without talking a little bit about tools. So talking about percentiles, which is really important to understand how we actually evaluate. So you can actually skip ahead 2 slides, Ben. So if you look at evaluating quality against these percentiles, our primary goal is to optimize for the user and their quality of experience, but not just a few users. We want to make sure you are creating good experiences for as many people as possible. So given this, to classify the overall performance of a page or site, we use the 75th percentile value of all page views to that page or site. So in other words, if at least 75% of page views to a site meet the good threshold, then the site is classified as having a good performance for that metric. And like I said, to confirm that a threshold is achievable, we require that at least 10% of origins currently meet the good threshold when we actually launch these expectations. And additionally, to ensure that well-optimized sites are not misclassified due to variability of data, we have verified that well-optimized content consistently meets the good threshold. So don't worry about little variances there. As far as some notes about tooling, again, I'm going to skip through this very quickly, but there's so many goodies. There is full support and tooling coverage for all 3 Core Web Vitals. And there's way more than what's listed here, including a new Web Vitals library. So you're able to measure your Core Web Vitals for a specific page, for your origin, locally in the lab, and from real users in the field. And I want to make a quick call out that total blocking time, or the TBT that you see here, it's a proxy lab metric for first input delay. So it allows you to debug and improve interactivity in the lab without having that real user input. As far as getting started, I will say a good place to start to get a general pulse is going to PageSpeed Insights. All of our tools do have a part to play, but that will allow you to see both your field and lab data in one snapshot, and it is based off of Crux data, which is a very important data set as far as evaluating your Core Web Vitals performance. And I do want to also make note, one of the biggest questions that I get as somebody who works on Lighthouse is, okay, you're telling us Core Web Vitals and then you give us the Lighthouse score. What the heck, guys? Like what is this? How do they relate? And what I want to make sure people understand the relationship. So Core Web Vitals represents the table stakes of any good experience, which is why we have them included in Lighthouse. And if you click the animation, you can see them called out here. And there's been a lot of work done to make core vitals more actionable in the Lighthouse report as well. And just as you saw with page experience signals, so in the Lighthouse report, have additional quality signals added that tell you a more comprehensive measurement story above and beyond those core web vitals. So on a high level, we want to make sure that you can get a sense of your loading performance, your interactivity, and layout predictability. And the metrics and the weights of those metrics that formulate the top level score are intended to give you a balanced view of your user experience against critical dimensions. Next slide, please. So with Lighthouse 6.0, the current Lighthouse performance score, as you can see, the various metrics are weighted differently based on what we have found to be the most important for a good user experience. Core Web Vitals, with one exception, are the most heavily weighted metrics in the Lighthouse performance score. So when you're optimizing against the Lighthouse score, you're setting yourself up for success with Core Web Vitals in the field. And the fact that CLS was weighted less was that at the time of Lighthouse 6.0 being released, CLS wasn't as mature as it currently is. So you can expect in the next update that Lighthouse will accommodate for an increased weighting in CLS. So moving forward to, why we're here, Magento and Core Web Vitals, right? How can we start to think about this in the context of the sites that you love and know? So Core Web Vitals and Magento, when you're looking at real user Core Web Vitals experiences, what I want to preface this with is, this is no easy task, right? These are intended to make sure that across the board, people are experiencing fabulous experiences to ensure that you are setting yourself up for business success. So we don't want to, make it too trivial to do, because then it's not helping your business metrics. So, we need to make this something that's achievable, but is going to have impact for you. So next slide, please. So these cover the origins, of which there are about 8 million in the Crux dataset. So we are pulling whatever sites that are made on top of Magento from the Crux dataset. So a subset of the 8 million origins that we have in that dataset. And this is lab data. So it's emulated runs on Chrome for desktop and emulated Android on Chrome for mobile. And I did catch a typo in here. The first in the legend is supposed to be desktop and then mobile. So there is work to do, but I am just so excited with the work that's being done, and just crazy confident that we'll be moving this forward. If you want field data for your origin or specific page, a great place to go is to check out the Crux dashboard or page speed insights, which you can see here. And then the last resource that I really want to call out is I encourage you to check out HTTP archive for Magento. So that's next slide. And that's where you can filter and deep dive into things like average number of requests, total size, and more. It is just a wealth of information, and it's where the previous graphic about comparing e-commerce sites was pulled from. And I will close it out with just, we really actively, genuinely, we're not just saying it, we genuinely want your feedback, and we take it very seriously. So on the next slide, you will see an email that goes directly to our teams. It's a cross-functional team, so this will be seen by developer relations and metrics teams and tooling teams and the like. So this is a great way to submit thoughts. And with that, I'm sure y'all are itching for, okay, now I know what I have to do, but how do I do it? And that is where I pass it to the lovely Drew.
Yeah, so this was the question that we started to face. Last time I talked about this, I actually measured this in Meet Magentos. I said that we started to look at this 3 Meet Magentos ago. So over the last 3 years, JH have undergone a transformation about the way we work and the technologies that we work with. That meant that at a time when not many people were, we dove into PWA and kind of took the plunge when Venya was young and began on that PWA journey. And that took us from this question of, is it even a good idea, to why aren't we doing this for everything? And that's become our kind of guiding star now, is that we are doing this for everything. We have, I think, 3 in production and likely another 3 this year. So it's quite a big change. But to be able to deliver things in this way and get this performance and experience benefit, what we've had to do, and the assessment that we've more often than not asked ourselves, is about how do we serve less? How do we deliver a smaller payload for everything that we are going to be putting on page? How do we defer the load of third parties? How do we potentially display, for instance, a search input box? How can we hook that up to a third-party service such as Algolia, but not call the Algolia library until such point as it's genuinely required? There are tricks that we've used with that lazy loading and deferring and bundling that mean that what we initially serve and what we initially paint can be significantly smaller than the eventual experience upon interaction. And that's the lesson, the hard lesson we've had to learn over the last couple of years.
Yep, for sure. No, I mean, again, I think your experience, Drew, I think has been fantastic, and I think you continue to help feed and shape the process and what we're doing around the product. And so I think this is probably the point, if we were in person as panelists would look at each other and I think have kind of our own questions before we turn it over to the audience. I think my questions really come from a place from kind of where people get started on this. And a lot of times, we'll see in the community, people will run a Lighthouse report and go, hey, this makes sense, or this doesn't make sense, or why, or, and I think, I'd love to get your perspective, Elizabeth's perspective, and even Ben, based on maybe what you've seen on, like, where would people get started? Like, kind of thinking beyond Lighthouse. Are there some kind of tips and tricks on what you're seeing around Magento? Is there more than just kind of HTTP archive to make some of those improvements? Or is there some low-hanging fruit? I know that the Chrome team has been an active participant at some of our Magento events and have actually run Lighthouse for the past year or two. Like, what would you say to the community about that and how that might get started?
Sorry, I don't know if that was directed to me, but I can totally
Either
take
one.
it.
Go for it. Yeah. Again, we can't look at each other unless we're all looking at.
Yeah.
It's totally. No, that's really. I think let's drop on the experience from I think the Google standpoint. But again, Drew, as you work with customers, I think that's a really important viewpoint to have here.
Yeah, I mean, we're frequently in the position, even with the customers after launch. I think that's kind of the question here, is that throughout our development process, we're constantly running against tooling. So Lighthouse is an important tool for us in that kind of sandbox space. But the biggest problem for us when we're doing that is that Lighthouse score is based against the machine you're running it on. So one of the things that we started to look at early was using virtualization tools to go and run tests against real devices to start to get back more meaningful data. And it helped us to see early how performance on your desktop for these content, particularly like blocking time, you'd think of, it's fine. You'd run it against a virtualized real world device, tiny CPU on a little screen, and all of a sudden that number doesn't look so great. And it helped us to optimize further. Is that we made sure that the numbers that we worked from were as real world as we could, as quickly as we could.
Yeah, I think that's a really big takeaway. I think there's a couple aha moments that I've had, in working personally with the Chrome team, and I think others felt as well. I think one of them was very early on. We all kind of looked at our own mobile devices and then realized the fact that not everybody has, now like the iPhone 12 or the highest end Pixel as part of this. And I think creating empathy around what those real world experiences are has a lot to do with the direction and some of the work that Elizabeth team have been doing to drive the kind of the lab and field metrics that are coming through, as you're seeing that with Crux and others. And so I think there's almost a proactive and reactive way to do it. So proactively, how do we educate ourselves on these real world experiences? If you're the customer, like actually have them go through their own web experience and the empathy of like, wow, that took a decent amount. Like if I stopped talking for 10 seconds, which I'm sure everybody would appreciate, like that would be very odd. If you're in the middle of a purchase, like that's not good, right? And so like, I think looking beyond that, looking at ways to have tooling, like you said, through virtualization. We actually use Trio.sh on our team to actually to take the local environment out of the picture and really look at crux data, really look at everything, whether it just be Venya, which is our reference storefront, but also some of our key customers. I think the findings are really interesting. And in some cases, the remedies are pretty straightforward as well. Not all, but you know, I still remember talking to Rowan several times where like image weight just keeps coming up time and time again. And so small fixes, like you said, like lazy loading went a long way. But like even things like, you know, image formats and others, and we've seen some interesting experiments on that in the community to look at improvements there. Those go a long way to making that experience better. So
it's interesting you mentioned sort of next gen image formats because you know, JH, we've done a lot of work over the last 2 years, but one of the things that we are still working on doing is automatic image optimization. You know, looking past the implementation, for example. You know, that's still roadmap for us. Is that we've spent all this time looking at code optimization and trying to defer every possible resource until it's required. But when serving images, we're still quite reliant on our customers' management of that. So that's the next step for us, is that we're looking to get in the way of that and prevent that from ever becoming a problem.
Yep, for sure. And I think some of the other aspects around CI are interesting as well. I think internally, as we look at things like Lighthouse CI to help us understand the impact of every little change, I think right now we have and I think just the community has a very developer-led focus, but if you start to take that into the content and authoring experience, and so if you think about it as a marketer making a change there, really understanding the impact of like, hey, maybe I shouldn't put this fancy 10 meg image on the front page. It might have its own effects, right? And so like just, you know, really being proactive about that to help avoid some of those situations, I think go a long way. And there's a lot of tooling there, I think, that is, again, I think we're just scratching the surface on the potential. Again, we've seen a couple great use cases where companies do this, but I think as a community, as in a platform, I think it's really up to us to find that common base and really be that force multiplier for the hundreds of thousands of sites that are out there. Like what would be useful to up level that using some of the kind of the raw materials that we see, and kind of, again, get us to that empathy that we were talking about.
It's very important for us to try and put this information in the hands of our customers. At the moment, they're quite reliant, in a sense, on us as a partner, in drip feeding them that and giving them the information about the impact that the site makes at launch and the impact of any changes afterwards. Obviously, the inclusion of more third-party scripts. Marketing departments need that access and they need that flexibility, but it can have a negative knock-on impact that unless your partner is raising it to you, may remain invisible. Building in tools for reporting on core web vitals, you know, looking at like auto web perf is one of the things that, again, for us this year is really important. We want to put this in the hands of the people that we're building for, so that we are all aware of the effects that these things have and collectively taking action. Yep,
absolutely. And I think, go ahead, Elizabeth.
Oh, I was just going to add one thing on that is I know, you know, just on a personal level, as far as my work on kind of developer tooling, I know one of the kind of interesting and fun tensions that we have is that we're, you know, our tools, our users are developers, but we need it to be information that can easily be brokered to non-technical audiences. And so understanding how we can create that kind of constant monitoring setup. So two points that have already been brought up, but I want to reemphasize in terms of, you know, answering some questions about roadmaps that on tasks we can look at to improve speed performance, making sure that you have an adequate RUM and lab setup. And this is both pre-production and post. as far as lab. So CI, having a good CI so that you can then, when you see field data regress and you can't diagnose it and you don't know what's going on, you can look and see what was pushed and start to actually diagnose it. So just simple things of setting yourself up with that measurement story is it. I know Eric and Drew, you've already said this, is just, it goes a million miles. And the last thing I'll say is as far as, and I'd be curious to hear some of your thoughts on this from the other panelists, is how you maintain site performance, because an analogy that I've used in the past is, you can't expect to, just go on a diet, get super fit and be, rock hard abs, right? And then you start eating 5 cheeseburgers a day and expect that, to remain. That's not, sadly, how it works. It is a constant sustainable thing. So I'd be curious how you work with clients to kind of instill this constant trade-off discussion.
It's exactly that for us, is that it is a constant discussion. And I think the most honest way to say it is that it, for us, it comes in peaks and troughs, because there are times of year when it is very easy to have the performance discussion, and when you can push the right levers within a business to show how that performance, and Core Web Vitals does a great job of this, of clearly showing how performance is going to in fact impact you commercially. But at other times of year, say Christmas, then you may find that you're losing to the marketing team slightly, in that they need this thing now. But those conversations are business conversations, and it's interesting that it highlights how performance can be an ongoing business conversation. It is not purely a, like you say, you don't just get thin and it's done. It isn't just about we build it and it is forever finished. These applications are living. The web changes around them, and the content that feeds them is constantly changing. So they aren't static.
And I think I can discharge some of my duty here as moderator to loop in some of the Q&A. I mean, it sounds like I think my panelists here have been keeping an eye on things, because the conversation certainly seems to have evolved in the direction of the questions being asked. So it seems like, we're covering this area of that constant struggle to keep the hygiene and fitness of a site and of requirements on the mind of a customer, of the merchant. And so I like this idea of helping connect it to, well, you're gonna pay for this, dear merchant. You're gonna pay for this whether you implement it or not. It's just, do you want to address it head on? And if you do address it head on, you should benefit from it. You should see a lift, right? You should rank better. You should, we know we have the numbers that tie performance to increased conversion. So I like that this conversation is headed in this way. I like that the web is headed in this way. And I have a question, more, I guess, geographic question later on, but I think I'd like to kind of just jump quickly into a question from Jenna Warren from Creativity, who's asked, how should an agency roll out regression testing on projects prior to deployment? So I think, Elizabeth, this speaks to what you were talking about, which is essentially, you got to have the data, right? Just like to use your workout metaphor. And I personally, I feel seen because 2020 was not kind to my waistline, but if you don't start with a measurement, you don't know whether you're improving or not. So I'd say making sure that you have those. I think you called out specifically, like, make this just an outcome of your CI/CD, so that when you're doing those automated things that you all should be doing in maintaining and deploying, you have this data somewhere. But Elizabeth, could you maybe, or Drew, I guess, would you, either one of you, care to sort of maybe mention specifically those tools, or just quickly give people an indication of, like, how can we do this so that in addition to seeing we have a green build, or maybe as a condition of a green build, we see that we don't have a substantial performance regression? What all have you found in your experience?
for us, most of our time, and this is an interesting point for us. I mean, we're 3 years into it. We are at this point still not recording in CI as part of the build process. We record manually as part of our deploy process. Part of our reasoning behind this was to use virtualization against the server setups that we built to get essentially as close to a real world production score at the point of deploy, so that you have some idea of where that measure is for that deployment, so that you can base some idea of whether the needle has moved up or down. And continuously through the development process, even before deploy, we measure. So we have some idea what our target should be. But these tools can be built into CI, and as I was saying about, the kind of automatic perf monitoring is something that we are likely to include this year, because I would like the number at every step to be recorded rather than just at initial development and post deploy.
Yeah, +1 to all of that. And I would add that the way that I think about it is you want to have, there's kind of like a matrix that you want to make sure you have covered. You want to have field and lab and page and origin. And then for that matrix, you want to have it at where appropriate and where relevant for deployments and then for production site. And so just checking as many of those boxes as far as data that you have coming in on your pipeline will allow you to be set up to diagnose these issues as they arise, and make sure that you can kind of set a roadmap for yourselves. Is like, here's where we have this pain point across these origins. We're working on, say, 8 sites, 7 of them have problems with LCP. Let's tackle that, because guess what, if we hit this bird, we're going to be hitting it for a lot of our sites. Conversations like that, just as far as we have limited time, we can't do absolutely everything. How do we get started and see the biggest bang for our buck? Having having that data is you can't have those conversations without that data, in my experience.
Right.
Yeah, and
go ahead, Eric.
Oh, go ahead. No, I would build on one top of that. Basically one point on top of that is also things like Crux, I think, are really, really helpful. So I think part of this is looking at performance and looking at experience at both a macro and a micro level, right? And so if you look at the macro level, you can actually look at Crux data for any site and really see historically, and we've seen this with Impact, with launches and others, like, oh, this made a big difference. And I think as a business, as a product team, that really gives you a sense of where those questions and kind of where those micro aspects can be addressed. And so I encourage you to take a look at. There's a lot of data that's already out there that help formulate those questions.
Right. So this, and folks, I think this is something that we're just as this has been an ongoing process, as Drew has alluded to, this will remain. I mean, we are at the forefront of this. I say forefront. I mean, we're just basically riding this wave of performance ever forward, and finding out what works and what doesn't along the way. And I would encourage, especially the agencies and developers out there, you reach out and make sure that you're sharing knowledge, because right now what we want to do is we want to build up this practice. We want to build up this culture of performance in the Magento world. I mean, the more performant we make things in the Magento world, and I think I will go ahead and, Eric, I'll collect plenty of responsibility on Adobe for that. But the better the performance story is, the better the business is for all of us. So I will actually then jump into Eric. I'm going to throw this one right in your lap, this hot potato.
Bring it.
Eric Marsh and Robert Krant, or if you're German, Robert Krant, have asked similar questions here. So Eric has asked, where is Magento on addressing performance in the core products? So Pete makes the point that PWA is great, but not affordable for all retailers. So I'm assuming this speaks to the implementation costs, which is something that I know we've been discussing internally. With JS bundling features, et cetera, Magento basically just talking about, if I think just sort of taking Magento and not tweaking it, not giving it just some, following some best practices and if you're not paying attention to it, you can end up with a site that's not going to meet the conditions necessary to do well, especially post May 2021. And then Robert asked something similar. Will Adobe be rolling out updates to address Core Web Vitals, improve performance, and what is the time frame for those updates? And then I'm actually going to also add in from Mr. or Ms. Anonymous attendee, or attendee if you're French. I love my language jokes. Should I use SSR to improve Core Web Vitals? Now, as someone who used to slice Photoshop documents for a living, to create websites, server-side rendering, what's old is new, what's new is old again, what's old is new again. I am actually interested, where server-side rendering, what we think, how we think this rediscovery of this fantastic technology that seems at least tangentially related to HTTP. If we see how all these things tie together. So Eric, to you, I guess, to answer the Adobe product question, and then more generally to the panelists for server-side rendering.
Yeah, so I'm trying to kind of jotting this down and unpacking it a bit. So I think from a product standpoint, we're looking at performance from kind of two different vectors. We actually have made some pretty good progress, I would say, with the help from the team and the community on incremental performance updates via Lighthouse, going into as recently as 2.4.1 and then 2.4.2 coming up. So basically the incremental progress on kind of the current state. But a lot of the work that we're doing is it continues to evolve with our new storefront that is Venya, the new work that is PWA based. We do have several epics that we're looking at in Q1 that will continue to improve kind of out as that continues to kind of be a target for us, meaning making sure that not only are we great from a V5 perspective of a Lighthouse, but also V6 and others. And so that kind of covers the core Web Vitals piece. So we do have some improvements coming in after PWA Studio 9 lands after February in particular, but it's something that is near and dear to our heart. But we're kind of blending this both between kind of the current state, and again, we're doing as much as we can out of the box. We do know that things do get customized, there are extensions, etc., and that's always something that we're mindful of. But we do have quite a few epics again that we're going to be addressing in Q1 around the base case for Venya, and that also is going to include some of the work with Adobe as well.
Okay, and I know I saw Christian Munch, who the main person behind the N98 Mage Run, fantastic tool if you're not familiar, was chatting in there about Huva, which is the just one of the many iterations using. So as we at Adobe build out the necessary coverage and architecture for to fully enable PWA, performant PWA experiences. I mean, these endpoints work for everybody, and we're watching our ecosystem build really, really cool stuff. If you didn't see from, I think it was the most recent Reacticon from Yser Eidsma, where Willem Hickman from InnogenNet gave a great presentation on making how to make the experience enjoyable again, of really enjoyable to build fun front ends with Magento. And he started this. They've started this project, Huva, HYVA. There are some diacritics in there, but you'll find it online. And then my good buddy VMI Kopp has added on some admin scope work so that we can maybe get away from UI components. I'd say watch the space. That actually speaks a little bit to that SSR question, right? Because I think we are looking at a little bit of that server-side rendering story. And it turns out servers are pretty good at rendering stuff. And Drew, did you want to add on anything there as far as what you found?
Yeah, I mean, this is a kind of an important one to mention for our journey with it, and the answer for us is that, well, you kind of did. We did move to a server-side rendered approach fairly early, and part of the kind of reason, it sounds almost too simple, right? But we tried to let browsers do the job that they're best at, where we would serve the minimum HTML to paint the site, and then ask the browser after that point to deal with JavaScript. And in fact, that's gone so far for us now that we have quite wholeheartedly embraced this idea of lazy hydration, where components aren't pass data or are reevaluated by JavaScript at all if they don't need to be. So an image that's just being dropped there static on the page doesn't need to be passed through the main thread again and reevaluated and repainted. It's already there.
Yep.
And it's doing those things that have actually kind of helped us to creep up. And Eric made a kind of great point about Zelko at the kind of beginning of the talk, talking about its resilience. And part of the thing that helped us to be so resilient when that was the huge traffic surge of like, all right, so we can't go to the shops anymore happened. Part of that was varnish caching that saved us for that. And because we varnish cache our SSR result, which goodness knows, I mean, like who'd have thought that caching would help, right? Again, it's the things that we're almost used to if you've been in this game as long as I have, that are aiding the performance. That those requests being cached and being immediately available help the performance. It helped our resilience. So for us, it's worked. It's a technology that we're going to continue with, even though it's just the new old way.
Well, and Eric, as we've, I'll ask kind of kind of in the spirit of openness, I'll ask a question, GraphQL. I mean, GraphQL is not, it is no more the all-knowing, all-performant answer. It depends. Right. There's a lot more. There's a lot more that enables a satisfactory experience. But I mean, do you think we are, because we're continuing to build out our GraphQL coverage, but Eric, would you say that GraphQL, at least as much as it fits in to the Magento space, is it hoping to deliver some of this by trimming down on the request, basically whatever's going over the wire to components getting exactly what they need?
Yeah, I mean, I think you probably said it better than I could. I mean, GraphQL gives us an API that's more efficient than anything we've had before. I mean, yes, things, you could do some of this and most of this with REST, but part of the premise when we started off with this with Magento 2.3 was to fast follow all the great coverage as we started to kind of open up headless for the platform. But yeah, server-side rendering is a whole interesting topic. We could have another hour on that alone. I'll say that, we continue to watch the space. The React server discussion that came up a couple of weeks ago has been particularly interesting, as we're also, what's old is new again. But we also have some exciting improvements on the platform here in the next quarter to really go in kind of all in on Node as a means on our Magento cloud to help really support this in a turnkey way for our merchants. So we're aware of the need, but in many ways we also want to stay flexible and offer those options in case that may not be for you. And I think, again, some of the data we've seen from Google and others, there are hybrid ways to do this and achieve very much the things we've talked about. And I think that's a good thing. You want to have developer choice. You want to have options across the way. But at the same time, also important to have that point of view because it's sometimes, they're going to look to us on kind of what the best practice is, which is great.
Okay. Go ahead, Drew.
I was it's always nice to hear when the kind of Node support for the cloud platform is coming, and it's discussions that we've kind of had. Yep. And just one of the points that I kind of saw in earlier questions is I know for a lot of people cost in PWA or the cost of retooling and working in an alternate platform is hard, but being able to deploy onto the cloud platform using that technology is one of the things that I think some of our existing customers are going to be really excited about. It's going to help us to bring this technology to more customers and reduce really the costs to ourselves and customers by making best use of platforms without having to dive into custom infrastructure.
Yeah, it's helpful that I think the collaboration, the close collaboration that Adobe has with our Magento customers it really, it does. I've watched, especially in the last year. It's been going on longer than that, but I've been a little bit closer to it in the last year because the hell else was I going to be doing? It's been really interesting watching the impact of those feedback cycles. Being closer to our customers again is allowing us to build not just the product that people need, but also our own insights and tools to understand what our clients need, and then to actually release that and make those things available to the ecosystem. I'm going to take a sidestep for a moment. Another question, kind of, Eric. Tyler Jensen has asked, does Luma with no modifications meet the benchmarks? And I believe the benchmarks in question are sort of like that performance mark for that good performance mark for Core Web Vitals. But I don't know that. I mean, I know I haven't run the measurements. Now, Mark Schuss, long time educator in the Magento space, is and also runs a really cool Docker project for Magento devs. Has noticed that basically his information says yes, it does if you're using, especially if you're using front end caching. But Eric, I don't know if you could provide any more color there.
Yeah, no, I think so. That's the always it depends answer on these. I think it is good in its current state. I think there are a lot of infrastructure and kind of setup and configuration needs that help you get to where you need from that. So if you run a Magento cloud, we can help and kind of optimize more for that. If you're doing it on-prem and others, you need to make sure that you've got caching and other aspects that support with what you need. So we don't, we build it as a base case, but I think there's ultimately some responsibility on some of the other areas for that. But that's, we've made a lot of improvements, I would say, the last year, including things like, the bundling and other aspects that have been introduced.
And another question from Robert Kant that's really good. And Elizabeth, I think this is something where we might even enjoy your perspective. Can you provide a roadmap on what tasks we should look to improve speed, basically to improve performance? And also, can you discuss benefits of PWA versus AMP? I think well, we can talk about the performance question first, but then separately, I think I'd like to actually address the structure of the question, PWA versus AMP. But maybe, so panel, what would you say about, like where are those quick, easy wins, such as they might exist?
Bundling and caching first, especially if you're not in PWA world. And to some extent, some of the same, exactly the same problems that we have. I said, I prefaced the first and most important lesson we learned was about being smaller and attempting wherever possible just to send less. And it's the same deal. Start looking at what the largest resources you serve are. Start being very questioning about whether you need to serve those resources either at all, whether they can be compressed, whether they can be removed, and if they can't be compressed or removed, can they be deferred? Do that first. You'll get a lot of mileage out of that before you start making any of the changes.
Yeah, 100% share that view. And, that's also reflected in, a lot of the work that we've been doing is trying to figure out how we make sure that you can granularly attribute different assets on your page and third-party impacts and all of this, so that you can just kind of parse and make those decisions. Because sometimes you'll be like, hey, this is fairly heavyweight, but we need it, kind of a thing. And that's fine, but you need to make that you need to make that decision very consciously and in an informed way. And I'd probably be killed by half my colleagues for saying that, but but the other piece is, we're working on is how, to your point, Drew, about deferring and loading in creative ways, is this idea of kind of third-party facades and reducing the impact of embeds, and providing a way to show the user something that they think is the full embed, but it doesn't actually, serve you anything or incur any cost until a user actually indicates that they want to view that content. So yeah, basically agree. That was a long way of saying yes.
Yeah, I mean, we've got there's an example we like to talk about when we did that for PWA with say Algolia search, which is it's a big library. It's really powerful, but it's a cost hit to think about loading that, because the search bar is present on every page, to have that script incur the penalty of load for every single user. So rather than doing that, the input box that's shown makes no call to Algolia at all. In fact, doesn't even begin calling Algolia when you start typing. It looks to, after you've typed a couple of characters, it goes, right, you're actually typing. We really do want Algolia, do you?
Yep.
And then loads the library, sends the input to Algolia, and then starts loading the results. And it means that script is not served to the vast majority of the user base, and there's no need for them to load it. They're not using it.
That is, those are the kinds of things that we will be doing moving forward. I think we benefited from, I don't know if it was just naivety or things were a little bit easier back then, but having had the fortunate opportunity to travel so much in my work, I've been on trains in India and understood exactly why bandwidth matters, exactly why the PWA experience matters, because you've got connectivity and you've got no connectivity. The handoff from cell to cell can be spotty. People who've, at presentations around the world, I also like to point out that this shit happens when you're in New York. It happens when you're on the tube in London. And as we get people more and more accustomed to just the seamless experience of performant experience with that smooths the rough edges of the realities of this world, where our radio waves can't always penetrate. I think we benefit, but that does bring up, speaking of it, to my mind, in India, because of the early demonstration that I saw, one of the earliest at the Google campus a few years ago for AMP, was, I want to say it was Mithra. It was a Indian fashion site, and but this was the consumer, the essentially the catalog experience of the site was pushed into the Google results, right? So if I'm searching for some clothing that for which they rank highly, then they're going to come up in the search results. But it's not just that top level, go to this site or to this PDP. It's, oh, here's our categorization, and you have this kind of handoff, a more nuanced handoff between Google, and then you get into the catalog experience. So I think it is related, it is tangential, but Elizabeth, maybe you could help provide, as the resident Googler in this talk, you could provide a fair characterization of how to think of the two technologies and how they relate and not.
Yeah, so full disclosure, I am more familiar with PWA than I am with AMP. As we know, with Google, it's big. So sadly, I just want to make sure that I'm not representing myself as an expert in the space. But per kind of your comments, this is not kind of versus, might not be the right way to put it. One is, really, PWA is really thinking about, okay, what constitutes an experience that is very app-like, and starts to make your web experience more akin to that of what people would expect for native. So things like installability, this works offline, you can access it from your home screen, there are certain speed and just credential expectations associated with it. So that's kind of PWA and again, very high level. Whereas AMP is really just a framework that kind of guarantees you a certain set of performance benchmarks out of the gate, and just helps you to kind of hit a certain foundation based on what your use case is and what industry you're in, and it may be a reasonable choice to move forward with, particularly depending on what industry you're in. It can be extremely powerful. So that's just high level, the distinction. Yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you for that. I mean, I think it is, you know, these are, it's clear that we're all finding our best way forward. Some of us forging paths, maybe ahead of others, but you know, one of the things I've enjoyed particularly about the Magento ecosystem is the tendency to, you know, leave the ladder behind us and then, you know, reach the hand back, right? So the people who are running the forefront, maybe businesses like JH, you know, and other agency partners who have contributed extensively to Magento's own product, and you know, sort of that, so that benefit gets revisited back to the rest of the ecosystem. That brilliant Mr. Osborne over there. So you know, I would like to put a call out there as Wade. I think we're well within time, but if anyone has any last questions, I'd say go ahead and kick those in, and feel free to ask them anonymously. But I promise no one will laugh at you for the question you ask. But I wanted to remind everyone that Magento, you know, PHP in general, Magento in particular, is a participation sport. You know, when you can, you know, we invite your contribution, whether that's looking, you know, looking on GitHub for something to do or discuss, whether that's, you know, posting the knowledge that you have out to the ecosystem, or, you know, or just facilitating a dialogue among, you know, among the peers at the office. It doesn't have to be all the way out in public to have a meaningful impact. But we certainly like it when it is, because I think we all have something to offer in the space, and we benefit from the sharing of that. So panelists, I will throw it to you. Does anyone have any last words before I close this session out?
I think there's just I'd love, Ben, to kind of echo some of what you said there, and that for us, we spent the last couple of years kind of being at the front of this, and really being that you know, 2 steps ahead of what the rest of the PWA space was doing. But it is really important for us to help bring everyone along with this. This wasn't ever the case that we would do and hoard and it would never make it back to the community. If there's anything that people want to, you know, kind of send to us and ask of us about the implementations and the ways we've worked, it is happily shared. That's the point of being part of this community, is to make sure that we're bettering it for being a part of it.
Yeah, and I'll build on what Drew said. I think in terms of the community itself, and so I think the big takeaway is that we're always out there, right? And I think, yeah, although it's a bit cliche, we are just as much proud of how we've done things as what we've done. We've done a lot of great work, but that wouldn't be even remotely where it is today without the 2,000 plus that is sitting there every day in our Slack community, asking questions, sometimes hard questions, helping us shape the product. We've got 2 great maintainers between Lars and Jordan that help really not only answer some of the questions, but get people started. And so I think that access and transparency is really big, right? This is a change for a lot of individuals. You know, sometimes a different skill set, sometimes a different kind of look on things, and that's okay. We want to help each other kind of get to that next level. And again, thinking well beyond just PWA, thinking about experiences and making sure that everybody's needs are covered. No small task, but I think the way that we're doing it is the best way we can, and really being inclusive, and really, again, looking to each other to do this together.
And speaking of hard questions, Sergey has jumped in at the last moment. Can you expand on the major drawbacks of PWA? Many agencies praise PWA, but is there another side of the story? Now, I'll jump in just to, you know, maybe earn a little bit of my paycheck, and I'll say, yeah, it's new. It's being defined. I mean, unfortunately, when you think about the newness of PWA, and who all's involved in writing that story, you know, the collaboration with Google, Magento and Google on PWA in the commerce space was intentional. I mean, this was literally a few years ago that we, a few of us from Magento went over to the Google campus, and you know, we got into this, and I realized when I was in the room with the people who were writing from Google, who were writing the RFCs that basically make the PWA spec, you know, it's pretty humbling. But you know, so the thing, you know, basically what we're trying to do is, you know, is fundamentally, or hopefully, make the web a better place in terms of, you know, from a performance standpoint, and you know, and then that benefit kind of just is multiplied across all sorts of areas, whether, you know, you're a customer and you're just less frustrated or more pleased with your shopping and checkout experience, or, you know, you're reducing your hosting costs as a merchant, or you're able to provide you know, make more money as a merchant. Agencies are in that curious space, as Drew has pointed out, because there always have to be pioneers. I mean, they didn't go with, you know, 1.0. They went with like 0.01, and you know, and really shimmed a lot of the stuff that wasn't there in order to deliver like the UK Meds website.
Yep.
But the payoff was tremendous. I mean, if you just go out and look at the UK Meds story for Magento and PWA, and of course and JH, and you'll see that the benefits are real. I mean, it's not puffery. It's you know, real benefit, real money was had, but it was a lot of work. It was an absolute, it was a tremendous amount of effort and a lot of learning, you know, and fortunately they were willing to share it. So for me, I would say, you know, the drawback of PWA is that it's new, but in this business, I think we're long past the time where you can sit on your laurels, right? I mean, if you are stationary as a platform, if you're stationary as an agency, you are actually moving behind, because the bar is being pushed ever forward. The consumer expectations are being pushed ever forward, and as we've seen with, you know, with just all of the adjacent technology, I mean, even app stores have been sort of you know, felt that thumb pressure of progress from Google, saying like, hey, this is the way things should go. And so we all need to be abreast of this, and all need to move forward. But you also need to have, I think you need to take stock as an agency. You need to not just say to a prospect or to an existing merchant customer, oh, well, you know, we recommend Magento, or you're on Magento and they have PWA, so, you know, this is easy. No, I mean, it's just like anything else. Like, you have to learn it. And as that story evolves, there will be continued learnings. So I have a related question that I'll get into before we close, along the lines of, I'm going to ask each of you panelists where do you see all of this, waves hands, all of this in 3 years time? But I'll pull in Robert's follow-up question on AMP and PWA. I mean, for Core Vitals purposes, Elizabeth, should agencies and merchants look for both AMP and PWA, or is it more important to really focus on the latter?
Yeah, so I'm going to just say a few things, because I don't think there is a blanket answer here, speaking bluntly. But I will say that, you know, the intention of Core Web Vitals is that it is applicable to all industries, all types of experiences, and all stacks. So it is intended to be the agnostic kind of quality measurement tool that is, you know, it's the bar for everybody, hit it however you please, so to speak. You know, and so, you know, whether or not you choose to use AMP to assist you in that, I think is something that you need to kind of, you know, discuss with your team, see if it's the right stack for you. There's trade-offs. Like I said, it's super powerful if it's right for you, because it does bake in so many benefits. But ultimately, there's not a blanket answer to that question. And then as far as PWA, I'm speaking from a biased standpoint of just like, I am hugely a fan, because I think that it is, you know, I am first and foremost a fan of the web. And I know that in order to, you know, make sure that the web is as thriving of an ecosystem as possible, that making sure that users can engage with it and discover content in a way that they understand as far as the existing distribution channels that they're familiar with and the behavior of, searching for applications and that kind of thing. So I feel like PWA is very, important, but I think Core Web Vitals and AMP and PWA, these are all, there's obvious crossovers. They're not completely separate topics, but they are kind of slightly three different domains. If that resonates with the rest of the panelists, I'd be happy to have folks disagree with me.
Heads nodding in the affirmative is what I'm seeing.
Yeah. That's a great way. That's a great way to put it. I mean, to some degree, I think the example, Ben, that you mentioned that Willem and team have put together, you can actually achieve a lot of this even with current state, right? There's some experimentation to help you achieve that, and that's okay, right? In terms of, and so a lot of the just looking at is about looking at options, and I think kind of getting head on your 3-year question. I think if we're doing this well, this is no longer called PWA. This is no longer called a set of tools. Like, this is just well beyond it. Like, we're not talking about RWD. Hey, how's the responsive RWD site? Or is this RWD? And it is just the web. It is just commerce. And I think we'll continue to learn from each other as we push the limits of this. The other part too is how we close the gap on experience. If you really look at the details, and I think Project Fugu is a great way to look at this. We're just scratching the surface on said capabilities. Some of these capabilities, the premise of PWA is almost 5, if not 5 years old itself. There are other capabilities like Bluetooth and screen lock and other areas that are starting to become more prevalent in devices, that when you think about PWA capitalizing on those, that's what the next 3 years are going to be about. It's about taking advantage of those kind of, from a developer standpoint, one API at a time. But if you look at it from a merchant standpoint, it's a collection of experiences. So we're just not talking about those. We're talking about the experiences that were once reserved from native. So,
Drew, anything to add there?
I agree with Eric that really, when we're talking about PWA in 3 years' time, we're just talking about what the web is going to look like. I've been a massive proponent of this technology from pretty much day dot and got on board early. I was playing around with this before the first venue implementation, and some of these kind of core API level technologies that are technically already available to PWA are things that for us we're only just starting to use and to bake into our applications. But that's because the hard work for the first few years of implementation and kind of dog fooding this is that we've learned how to PWA. And now it's the point where over this year and the next couple will be those PWAs becoming what the web is becoming, this app-like experience. I feel probably quite a significant blurring between what you would think of as App Store and what you would think of as web. I don't believe there's going to be that much of a difference in a couple of years' time. Yeah,
and I'll say just something that just proof in the pudding is just as of a month ago. The installability can now be measured, as it's powered by capabilities checks that are in kind of Chrome's actual installability criteria. So this is now kind of baked into the actual platform, as opposed to, having to add logic on top to evaluate whether or not it's a PWA. It's moving down in the stack in terms of just being a baked in component.
Add to home screen. So I'd say, okay, so we'll close it out here. I think you all addressed that sort of that future perspective. I have a lot of questions, but this isn't my webinar. So Eric, where do you go as a maybe Eric and Elizabeth? Where do you go to find the future? Like, where do you go to get that picture? Like, what are the, are there particular websites or other resources where you say, okay, hey, this might be that thing that comes into scope?
Yeah, Elizabeth, you want to take a first stab at it from kind of a Google perspective, and then I can kind of localize it from a Magento standpoint.
Yeah, I don't have a great answer for you.
Right.
The first thing that came to my mind is just looking at the kind of feedback that we've been getting as far as our high level programs, and I'm obviously focused on kind of measurement of quality, so that's kind of my lens. And seeing the types of experiences and technologies that aren't measurable by our old methodologies and mechanisms. So how metrics themselves are having to evolve to accommodate for, you know, the new technologies that are being used and leveraged to create these new great experiences. So, you know, shifting the game, which one comes first, whether or not there are specific resources. I don't mean to be doing a plug for my own thing, but, you know, web.dev blog is something with the colleagues that are publishing there. A lot of it is kind of edge of web work that is really, you know, I read new stuff out there all the time, but again, shameless. I'm sorry. I'll leave it to Eric to leave a better taste in our mouth on the way out.
And if I can translate, folks, if you don't see anything in front of you, that means you're the leader. So Eric, I'll over to you. Like, where do you? So when you're talking about like Fugu and you're talking about Bluetooth and all these, you know, this stuff on maybe on the horizon, where do you find out about this stuff?
You know, it's a good one. There's not a single resource. I would say you've got to spend the time thinking about what it means for, you know, for your business, whether you're a developer, partner, and merchant, which sounds, again, a little bit vague, but I personally don't think we spend enough time doing it. I don't think, you know, we've got to reserve the time thinking about, again, Crux is a great way to look at like you know, like where you as a business, where you as a storefront sits. And then, subscribe to, you know, your usual places. I think, you know, Elizabeth said, mentioned a few others. Plug for the Magento Association. There's some great thought leadership that's happening there on some of the posts. Like there's not one place, but I think our job though is to continue to make those and kind of bake those in as standards, right? And so if you take a look at, if you take the example we often look at is like Starbucks as a PWA, one of the very first ones out there. It is fantastic, but it was incredibly customized, right? That Starbucks made a conscious decision, a big bet on technology, and it paid off for them. But as a platform, the responsibility and the ecosystem is a little bit different. We need to standardize and kind of be the ones looking out to how to bring those into, you know, quote unquote, the kind of the defaults where it makes the most sense. In some ways, we're kind of doing it for you, but there's a lot of it continues to move. Fugu is really, really fascinating. I wish we could be looking at things like payment requests and others to help look at the checkout and other experiences as well. There's so much there. It just, you have to focus, spend time. And part of it, just spending time with your own data. Again, whether you're Magento or JH, Google, or even a store that's looking at this. I don't think we spend enough time in it as we should. It just takes a little bit of discipline.
All right, final question before I close us out, coming from the audience, Alex Galden. Hope I pronounced your last name correctly there, Alex. Are there any examples of Magento sites with good performance results already? Yes. Maybe some you like lately. So maybe we can throw out a couple of examples for the audience to go and use as a reference, the experiences that we've seen that just kind of blew our socks off.
Yeah, no, Drew's chomping at the bit. You know, so JH actually has, so we do have record on some of the fastest PWAs that are out there to date. You know, several of them, no surprise, are coming from JH, and so we'll let him talk about a few of those. But we've got a couple other ones that have landed recently, like Elemis and Joma Shop, that we're really pretty excited about. They have a great blend of both performance and experiential qualities that kind of look beyond kind of your standard commerce site, and so you'll kind of see those before. But yeah, again, Drew and team, again, they've got kind of a hallmark for creating blazing fast sites, and so maybe you want to walk through one or two of those, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I would say definitely go and check out the likes of Workwear Express and Selco, and see how those are the scoring. I know that hand on heart, they're not scoring as well as they were when they launched. You know, when we talked about like real world performance and the effects of those are sites that the effect of third party scripts has slowed them since their launch, but they are by no means slow, and they're going to, you know. There's still a great way of seeing kind of what PWA can do, and I'd be remiss if I didn't big up the team and boast a little that, you know, they've done such great work.
Just one more marketing pixel. The pixel creep. That's what I'm going to go as Halloween. Go for as Halloween this year. I'm going to be the pixel creep. So, folks, to our audience, thank you so much for your time and attention today. Again, please feel free to promote this webinar after the fact. And in fact, if you want to get interactive after the fact, we can handle that somewhat asynchronously. Just you can reach out to us at the association. If you have any questions, we'll be happy to get them answered, or certainly to Eric, who is often visible out there in the ecosystem. And then I know Drew and JH are, they've always been other than shy when it comes to sharing knowledge and just leading from the front. So I'd like to take a moment to just remind everyone, if you were here, if you happen to not be a member of the association, I would very, very much would like to have you as a member. It is right now the bargain price of free, and your participation in the association is it helps not just the association, but it also helps the greater Magento ecosystem as we enjoy the benefit of working alongside fantastic partners like Google and others to bring you hopefully the content that matters, and in so doing, helping to shape the future of the Magento world. So if you want to join, you can find out more. You can go to magentoassociation.org/join. And above all, please remember to take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you all so much. And it's been a pleasure. See you soon.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks.